عليكم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So, first of all, thank you all for choosing our humble topic from the 12 that were offered to you during this time slot. MashaAllah, we have so many possibilities at this conference of parallel sessions. I actually think that this topic is incredibly important for MSAs to discuss. The issue of how to collaborate, why to collaborate. Why should we go out of our comfort zone and try to work with other people within the Muslim community or outside the Muslim community to accomplish good things? So what I'd like to do, and this is not going to be a rousing speech, okay, so everybody just relax. No one's going to be, it's not going to make anyone clap. But what I want you to do is actually take notes. So your hands will be free for typing on your phone, because I actually think this is that important. I'm going to split my time into two main topics. One, the case for cooperation, and then two, the principles of collaboration. What should we keep in mind when we're trying to make this our reality? So first I'll start with why. Why should we work together? What is the incentive? Because it is not easy. It's much easier to do things by yourself with other people that think like you and your friends and so forth, and working across different organizations is not easy. So the first thing is that it's a Quranic injunction, right? So in Surah Al-Ma'idah, and just for the background, Surah Al-Ma'idah is one of the last surahs to be revealed in full, as a full surah. And so it was coming to the believers when they were at the precipice of ruling the world. I really think of Surah Al-Ma'idah, if you read it in this regard, as a blueprint for leadership. How do these new believers, how does this new community now go on and rule the world? Because that's exactly what they were about to do. And Surah Al-Ma'idah was getting them ready. And one of the principles, one of the key points in Surah Al-Ma'idah, it simply says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Okay? Very simple. Cooperate for goodness and God consciousness, and do not cooperate for sin and enmity. And it's actually very important. The second part is just as important as the first part. The Quranic injunction is that we are told to cooperate for what is good. And what's interesting about the ayah is it does not specify who we should be cooperating with. It doesn't say with other believers only. It simply says cooperate for what is good and just. And don't cooperate for what is sinful and to breed enmity. And so it helps us, just set out the principle for how to cooperate, when to cooperate, and with whom to cooperate. If your cooperation is for a common good, then cooperate with anyone you want. But when you have to compromise what is your principles, what is good, and the price of cooperation is cooperating on what is sinful and breeding enmity, then that's when it doesn't work. So the ayah is quite lucid in setting out what those principles are. So it's a Quranic injunction. We have to do it. We have to work together, and we have to work with others. One example of this, and this is sort of the second, is from the Seerah, is the opening of Mecca. Now, for those of you who have studied the Seerah, you know that what led up to the opening of Mecca was that the Meccans violated the truce. How did they violate the truce? An ally of the Meccans, of the Qurayshi people, the Quraysh, an ally of the Quraysh attacked an ally of the Muslims. That is how the truce was broken. The ally of the Muslims that was attacked was a tribe that was not Muslim. Okay? So the truce was broken by an attack on an ally that was not Muslim. And that was how the treaty was broken, and that is how Mecca was conquered, or opened, really. Basically, almost like there was virtually no fighting. But the 10,000 fighters that came to Mecca, not all of them were Muslim. Some of the tribes that had come, who were allies with Muslims, to open Mecca, were themselves had not come into Islam yet. So why is this important? Because this is an example, a real-life example of alliances to do incredibly important work with people who did not share the faith. So it is perfectly okay to do that. But what is important is that the principle and the goal of that alliance is clear, and that we're not compromising our values just for an alliance, because that's not a real alliance. An ally will never ask you to compromise who you are as the price of being their ally. That's not an alliance. That's something else. That's actually using you. You're being used if you're asked to compromise who you are as the price of alliance. The third reason, the third thing that I want to share as the case for cooperation is those that we are up against are cooperating. I mean, this kind of goes without saying, but these are public announcements. I'm not sort of coming up with any conspiracy theory. There is a public announcement of the 5 largest pro-Israel organizations in the United States have publicly announced that they will be working together to counter what they call misinformation on social media about the Israel, what they call the Israel war with Hamas. So why am I saying that? Because any one of these organizations, again, these are public documents, public information, any one of these organizations' operating budget dwarfs the entirety of the Muslim civil society operating budget. Any one of them dwarfs 10 to 100 times our operating budget for all of our organizations combined. And they're working together where one of them would dwarf all of us, and they're working together and there's 5 of them. How can we then not work together for what is right and what is good and what is just? We cannot afford not to be cooperating. So there are 3 principles I'd like to share of effective cooperation. The first is specialization. What does this mean? We cannot duplicate each other's work. We cannot duplicate each other's work. Why not? If someone is yaqeen, okay, and they're doing research on Islam and Islamic theology, why shouldn't I start my own think tank to do exactly the same thing? What is wrong with doing that? Isn't it good to just have more and more of the same exact thing? The answer is no. Why? Because it is a waste of our resources. It is a poor stewardship of the resources that have been entrusted to you by the community to do work that's already been done by someone else. You are actually doing harm, not good. What you should do instead is find a gap and fill it, because we have so many gaps to fill. Doing work that is already existing, is already being done well by someone else is a waste of resources, a waste of your time and energy. When we specialize, then what we can do is work together effectively. I'll give you two examples, and these are directly from my work as heading research at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. So ISPU does research on the American Muslim community. We don't do research on Islam at all. We look at American Muslims and their challenges and opportunities. Yaqeen does research on Islam itself as a faith and what it offers, what it means, solutions for the world's problems, for our emotional problems. So what we did is we actually teamed up with Yaqeen to do two projects. One was a khutbah project where we were able to get to partner with Yaqeen to say, here are the challenges that American Muslims are facing from research. And Yaqeen was able to come in and put in the Islamic scriptural, addressing those challenges from that perspective of scripture. And we came together and provided khutbah tools for imams around the country to use that would be both relevant to the community because they were rooted in evidence and research and scripturally authentic. That was one project. A second one was we created a briefing tool for the people that come to your masajid and ask for your donations and votes, your local politicians or your congress members. They need to understand who we are. Now, what do they have to understand? They have to understand who we are as a community in terms of our demographics, what we offer, society, our challenges, our needs, our opportunities. That's what ISPU does. But they also have to understand what we believe, and that's what Yaqeen does. So we teamed up and we created this tool, which is a briefing tool for public servants that are seeking to engage the Muslim community. And any one of you can go on our website and use that to educate those coming to you for your votes and for your dollars. So those are two examples. And I'll just quickly run through the second principle, which is to make the problem that you're trying to solve the enemy, not each other. So when you can think about the problem you're solving, whether it's you're solving the problem of ignorance, you're solving the problem of Islamophobia, that is your competition. Those promoting that problem and increasing that problem are your competition, not other Muslim organizations working for the same thing from a different vantage point. And I understand the impulse of thinking of other Muslim organizations as your competition because we're all competing, in our minds, competing over the same tiny little pie of Muslim donors. That's how we think. So we're like, oh, we have all this turf war and we have to protect ourselves and not share information. That is absolutely the wrong way to work. Because Allah will provide according to whatever you're going to get, whether you work with someone or you don't. But when you think of the problem as your competition, what you're actually up against, you will be more effective, you will be able to go further, and you will be more willing to share information and support and help other Muslim organizations. And then finally, a third principle of cooperation is funders. Now, this is a message to anyone who is actually funding Muslim civil society or Muslim organizations. I would highly recommend that funders incentivize cooperation rather than competition. And this is not hard to do. It's simply saying, this is a grant, I'm gonna give, $100,000 out, but it has to be two distinct organizations doing very different work, coming together to solve a problem together. And they have to apply together. And so you're incentivizing cooperation rather than funders incentivizing unhealthy competition. Jazakallahu khairan.
Jazakallah khair. Mogahed, for that beautiful reminder. Just another quick reminder, please submit questions on the Mass app. I know everyone was busy taking notes during this last one, but if you guys want to take a break in between and submit some questions, you go to the Mass app, click on our session, and then there's a Q&A part right there. Jazakallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I just sit too long in meetings, so that's the only reason I'm standing up. Inshallah, I want to pick up where Ustaza Dalia addressed the topic. And actually, as she was the director of research for ISPU, and I am the vice president for Yaqeen Institute, and because we knew each other for a long time, she was comfortable emailing me right away and saying, hey, how is this going to work out? Because we formed Yaqeen about 7 years ago, and ISPU, if I'm not mistaken, 25 already? At least 25 years? 22 years old. So we knew that ISPU exists, and our full name is called Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Research. And so she wanted to know, hey, how is this going to work out? And I said, we have these directors of research, so let's get them in touch with each other. And that led to that collaboration on those two projects that she mentioned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathers all of us at a time when we are able to sit in this peaceful environment hosted by the Muslim American Society, to whom we're very grateful for hosting the MSA National Conference, while people of your age, my age, even younger, are literally now being bombed in Gaza, and it breaks our hearts to know that so much potential, tremendous potential, even the institutions of learning, library, universities, everything and anything has been destroyed and is being attempted to be destroyed. So we should begin by, number one, acknowledging and thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the privilege of being able to gather and have this sort of relaxed time when we can think and say, how do we improve and how do we build on what we have? So what do we have and how do we build on it? In 1963, a handful of students who had come to the US following World War II and the opening of the borders, if you will, for education, they had stopped in England and were studying there. And ultimately, they decided, when they formed what's called FOSIS, the Federation of Student Islamic Societies, they went to the verse in Surah Al-Imran, and they said, this is the verse that's going to guide us in terms of the work that we will do. And Islamic societies are the equivalent of MSAs, Muslim Student Associations. So when they left England and went on to they did masters there, some did bachelors, came to the US to do masters and PhD, then they said, you know what, now that we are going to form the MSA, then we will maintain the same verse, same Quran, same principles of cooperation. And that verse from Surah Al-Imran is basically وَأَعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. That hold all of you together to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do not be divided. Of course, that verse goes on to say that indeed you were divided and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought you together, and this is from one of His blessings and bounties. Why is that important? Because the prophetic tradition has been, and it is what has taught us, is that teamwork is going to be the success of any organization, And as he began to do the da'wah, he was literally alone. When he left the cave of Hira and he comes down and he's really troubled by what has happened to him, this experience of meeting Jibril alayhi salam, and he now has to convey the message. He begins with his wife, his cousin Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. If you're interested in that series of the firsts who became Muslim, sorry, my voice is going from the weekend. We have a series at Yaqeen called The Firsts. And Sheikh Omar goes live every other Tuesday. So you can see who are the people who became Muslim in approximately the order in which it was occurring. So he didn't stop there. So then he realized that there are people within his community who have certain talents, certain energies that they can bring. And he then, if he didn't find them and they didn't join on their own, he then made dua for them. And we know from the seerah that the answer to one of his dua is Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala. because he saw in him someone who should be with us. And this is the same of Sayyid Qutb rahimahullah, who said, Imam Hassan al-Banna, Imam al-Shahid rahimahullah, who said about Sayyid Qutb rahimahullah, that people were saying, what about him? He said, if he's not yet with us, he should be with us. Like he should be a part of this movement because he has certain skills and talents and so forth. Now, what did that mean? Umar ibn Khattab, who is he? He's literally the person who is on his way to hurt his own family members, who he discovers his sister has accepted Islam, and then on his way to kill the Prophet, peace be upon him. Imagine having to go from that image of someone to making dua for them and their heart to be turned and changed, and then they become literally the foremost beacon of light within the religion. Right? And amazing. When he entered the religion, it is narrated from the companions that when Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu entered the religion, until then we were persecuted. We could barely pray at the Kaaba. When he entered the religion, because of his stature, we marched in columns of twos and went to pray at the Kaaba. So who is on your campus? Who is on your campus that is not a part of the MSA? Who is on your campus that you've walked by and just sort of decided that doesn't fit our profile, but you don't know them? So what you have to do is go back. Those of you who are in leadership, just by a show of hands, how many of you are either on the board or in some committee of your MSA? By a show of hands, so I can drink some water. That's it. Okay, so the rest of you, are you in an MSA? Raise your hand. And the rest of you, this was the closest room and you got tired? How many of you are in high school? Raise your hands. How many of you are in college? Raise your hands. All right, and the rest of you are supporters and donors of the college students, mashallah. May Allah bless you. And parents, yes, of course. Loving parents, helicopter parents, never leaving parents, mashallah. May Allah bless you. So, even before the semester starts, if you are in leadership or you're on campus, go to Student Affairs, the Office of Student Affairs, and let them know, I would like to see the roster of people who are coming, who have either identified as Muslim on their application, or in some way, depending on the private and public institutions, they may ask that question. Or if I can look at the roster with your permission and I can identify at least the names that stand out. Why is that important? They need to know that you are looking for them. They need to know that you will welcome them. They need to know that there's someone on campus waiting for them. And this starts to create a sense in them that they belong, even before they get to campus. Once they get to campus, have as many low-threat activities. What does that mean? Social gatherings, where they can just come, they don't have to display their Islam, they don't have to show their level of iman, nothing, just to get to know each other. Where do we get that from? The Prophet, peace be upon him, had people who were literally knowledgeable and scholarly, and others who were just learning. He did not distinguish between them, but he gave special attention to those who wanted to learn more, and he spent more time with them. All of the youth are among them, which is why we have the Ibadullah, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, and so on. Fatima radiallahu ta'ala, his own daughter, Rumaysa, Nusayba, all of them from an early age. And of course his beloved wife, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. So what I'm getting towards is the welcoming environment, number one, for teamwork. Number two, it is very important to be honest with people. You don't have to be blunt, which is a word of your generation. You don't have to be hurtful, no. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was approached by Abu Dhar Ghifari radiallahu ta'ala anhu. If you read the seerah, go to the firsts, you'll learn more about him. He was beloved to the Prophet, peace be upon him. He went to him and he said, Ya Rasulullah, appoint me as a governor, because Islam was spreading and all of the different regions, they had structure, they needed people to lead those areas. The Prophet, peace be upon him, if I can think in terms of how this unfolded, must have looked him straight in the eye, because the words that follow only come from someone looking someone straight in the eye. He said, Ya Abu Dhar. He said, this governorship or this position is a heavy trust and you are weak. Now was he saying, like dissing him. No, you are weak. He said it becomes a source of disgrace, except for the one who takes it by right and fulfills it. You follow what I'm saying? He knew his skills and abilities, they were not in the realm of governorship. Just so you can follow along. So people can do different things within teamwork and collaboration, but don't let them take on something where they have not exemplified some skills or talents. They cannot become your spokesperson if you've never heard them articulate a clear message. And in that vein, I don't just praise her for the sake of doing it. I'm truly the older brother to the Mogahed sisters. Sister Dalia, whenever she's appeared on media, I've never had an issue because she does her homework, sometimes even more than the rest of us. So she's well prepared, so we can say, you know what, let her do it. Who else could go on the Daily Show, which is literally an American phenomena, and basically bring the house down by appearing and speaking and then answering about the hijab? Not about just some random thing, about the hijab, and the audience loved it. So right? Now she told you not to applaud. Remember she said that? She's very strict. Don't mess with her, right? So don't just take people and welcome them. Give them small assignments. Low-threatening activities to get the team and the spirit and the chemistry. Small assignments to see if they can truly deliver based on what they're saying. The worst of those assignments is, I was given a person who came to pick me up, supposed to pick me up. A person apparently didn't know anything about the city. So I flew in to do an iftar event for Fastathon. I was supposed to fly back out that same night. I was at the airport most of the time, and I got there after the event. And I said, who did you send? I said, well, he was really excited to meet you. Does he know how to drive? Does he know directions? Does he know anything, right? It's a total mess. Why doesn't somebody ask him? Send somebody with him, right? Whatever you can do. And then lastly, just to close out, thank you. To close out, we have guiding principles within our faith, and we have then used those to introduce them into MSA National. So way back when, just a year or two after September 11th attacks, we said most people don't know what the MSA is. They keep attacking us. Let us come up with these guiding principles. They are on our website. They've been there, and they go something like this. Knowledge precedes our actions. Learn. Number 2, truthfulness is the mark of our speech. Patience is the hallmark of our planning. Sincerity is the foundation of our existence. Forgiveness precedes our reconciliatory efforts. Humility guides our conduct. Gratitude binds our hearts together. Tolerance is the banner of our outreach. And moderation is the compass of our journey. And then we added, love is our highest aspiration. These were adopted, by the way. These were adopted even by other organizations that are not Muslim, because they articulate what it means to be a person on campus, what it should mean to be a person on campus. So in closing, you begin with the prophetic tradition of being as open as possible, as inviting as possible, but keeping an eye out on those who have certain skills and talents, and then putting in the mechanisms to recruit them and being welcoming in recruiting them. Number 2, start with the small, low-threat assignments so that they can deliver. If they don't do well, talk to them and say, you know what, it's okay, I know you want to speak, but it's going to be difficult for now. Let's just have you keep training, and maybe you can address us in the smaller gatherings, and we'll get you up there. And people, are constantly wanting the stage, but believe me, and my sister Dalia will say the same, and also Watfe, who is a student leader on her campus at DePaul, it is the most frightening thing to be on stage. Because the burden on us is the most difficult, and the dua always is for Allah to guide our tongues, to be able to deliver the message, the most accurately possible, and so on. So you don't want someone who's out there who is going to bring more and more difficulty. The other thing about, in closing about, with teamwork and collaboration, cooperation, is that have an assessment, have an evaluation. Don't just be on autopilot, just keep doing things, and you don't have a clue if it's working out or not. If you start collaborating with other MSAs, other organizations, have a check-in, 3 months, 6 months. What did we say we were going to collaborate on? How did we do? And where can we improve? What's not working? What's working? If you can maintain that, believe me, you will get to the point, as Dalia mentioned in her talk, that the Hilf al-Fudul, the alliance of virtue, was actually based exactly on this. Was that the focus was on the rights of the consumer at the time, if you will, the miskin, if you will. But the alliance of virtue did not include only Muslims. It included anyone who wanted to protect the rights of the vulnerable. And what did the Prophet, peace be upon him, say to us? After he became a prophet, that if I was called to such an alliance, I would still join it. Right? I would still join it. So it's not that we would, just walk away when the project is done. You'd want to find out how to continue to build on that relationship that you started, inshallah. So we look forward to your questions. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, my study. I forgot. Talk about my study. Yeah.
We got
I'm
quite a few
recruiting.
questions for you guys for listening and answering some of them. So our first one, how do you know who to trust when cooperating with others?
How do you know who to trust? So, good question. You do it in incremental parts, right? So you start with something low risk and you see if they follow through, if they're a person of their word, if they are on time, if they are sincere, and so forth. And then you build from there and you go up, in higher and higher risk. You don't start, doing the biggest project of your year with someone who's totally untested. That's not wise. The other thing I would encourage you to do is build relationships before you build projects. So what does this mean? So what Dr. Altaf mentioned is that we already knew each other before I reached out to him and said, how is ISPU and Yaqeen going to work together? How are we going to do distinct work? Because when I hear research institute, and we're a research institute, that could mean that we're duplicating, but we weren't. So we needed to have that conversation, but that foundation of trust was already built. And so it's incredibly important to build real life, face-to-face human relationships before you're able to work together, because working together will test even strong relationships. So if one doesn't even exist, it's much, much more difficult. You want to add to that?
No, I wasn't going to add to that. I was just going to go for a detour a little bit. So I'm for my professorship, my friends reminded me, we're doing a study on Muslim youth, 900 sample across the country, and it's in cooperation with the Family and Youth Institute. I'm the PI, the principal investigator at Howard. So ages 14 to 22. So the volunteers will pass around a QR code. It's a scanning for eligibility. Then our research assistants are on standby. They'll receive the screener, and then they will send you the survey. If you complete the survey, inshallah, then upon completion, then you'll be added to the database, and we will have a confidential, anonymous way to read what you've said, but you'll also receive a $20 gift card. That's not why you do it, but you should, right? And so please take the flyer, scan the QR code for 14 to 22. If you want to take a picture of it and share it with others who are below 18, do that. In that case, we need both the parents to consent and the child to assent to be a part of the study. But we think it'll be the first time Muslims are studying Muslims of 900 sample, and the recommendations will help with better parenting, with the masajid, youth directors and imams, inshallah, to be able to say, this is what the kids say is working for them to learn their religion, this is causing doubts, and this is causing problems. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for that.
Our next question, we've been hearing a lot throughout the past couple of days about voting in the next election. Who should we vote for if both parties are not honoring Muslim American voters, specifically with the rights of Palestine?
I think you should vote for Sister Dalia Mogahed. Write it in. Write it in. Write it in. In fact, you can do it and then DM me. Get it? DM. You don't get it.
You don't get it. No. Really, we can't tell you who to vote for. It's a very, it's a very difficult. First of all, 501c3, we can't endorse anybody. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. What I will do, though, is ask you, even if you don't like either of the presidential candidates, don't make that the reason you stay home, okay? every single one of us who can must vote. And here's why. First of all, if it didn't matter, if it didn't count, they wouldn't make it so hard. There is enormous, I hope this actually motivates you. We know that there is voter suppression among Muslims in this country, among people of color in this country. Why do you think they do that if it doesn't count? Why do you think those who don't want our voices heard try so hard to suppress our vote if it didn't matter? So that's one thing. Your vote does matter. Second of all, who you vote for is private, but whether or not you vote is public knowledge. So everyone knows if Muslims vote or if they don't vote. It is public knowledge whether or not you went in and cast a vote. So if you're living in a community that is, a substantial percentage are Muslim, and there's a 12%, voting rate, no one will care what you think. No one will care what resources go to you. Okay, you have to make it look. You have to show representatives. You have to show elected officials that your voice counts and your voice matters. So even if you're not going to vote for either candidate, for either of the major candidates, and you're going to write in a name or just leave it blank, still go in and cast your vote. You're voting for lots of things, not just for president. You're voting for members of Congress. You're voting for your city council. There's so many things on the ballot besides president. Don't make that the reason you stay home. Still go in and vote. Write in a name if you don't like whoever's on there, but don't make it a reason to stay home.
Okay, our next question, is there any way to influence Muslim countries to collaborate and cooperate for the good of Muslims?
I'm going to take that one.
No. I mean, the sad thing is, and again, I will refer to my good sister, she actually lived in the Emirates and, tried to do great work. And then we're looking around now and we're seeing, what countries, if a genocide didn't bring them together, I don't know what will. And the rulers have been there forever. They have a system where they just duplicate each other and they keep coming back. One of the scholars, I won't say his name, he's an imam of a masjid. His dad was an imam. His uncles are imams. He went to his dad because he was frustrated with his masjid. And he said, man, this board is killing me. I don't know what's going to happen. What can I do? And his dad, my dad looked me straight in the eye and he goes, you have to just wait for them to die. And he goes, how? He goes, why is that the answer? So technically speaking, we would hope that the younger people of those countries are watching what's happening, and then they will, inshallah, bring about the reforms needed for collaboration. At this point, we see no hope, because if a genocide couldn't do it, Allahu Alam, what is going to do it? So let's just focus on our MSAs. Let's do better with our MSAs, inshallah, and leave those folks to, inshallah, to Allah.
Our next question, sometimes it might feel like there is no central body directing our efforts. Is there an umbrella organization that we can channel our efforts through?
Time for a commercial. Where is MSA National? Oh, there she is. So she's even walking. She happened to be walking. She's the chair, Sister Nimra Riaz, born and raised in College Station, Texas, the home of Texas A&M. She's the current chair of the Muslim Student Association of the United States and Canada. And so that is the organization that is doing its best. In fact, this year we're celebrating our 60th anniversary of that organization that was founded, as 1963. So whoever asked that question, whoever didn't know about MSA National, they're here. They'll be here for the rest of the day, and no additional charge for that advertisement. Yeah.
Next question. Cooperation will often lead to some sort of conflict between groups of people, externally or internally. How do you navigate discourse on an organizational level?
Start.
That's absolutely true, and you have to expect it. Cooperation will often lead to some kind of conflict. I think there are at least 3 principles that you should keep in mind to navigate it. One is one I mentioned already, which is that you need to have existing, trusting relationships. So you know, this is kind of a slogan in the corporate world, but it's actually true. It's that you can only move at the speed of trust. And it sounds, hokey, but it's actually very true. You can only move at the speed of trust. If you trust people, then your disagreements are technical rather than personal. You're not questioning their intentions. You're disagreeing on, strategy or on tactics. And that's okay, and that can actually produce better solutions and better, better strategy if you are looking at things from different perspectives. So take the time to build real life relationships built on trust. That's number one. The second thing about navigating conflict, and this might sound very simple, but lean on the side of phone calls and Zoom meetings and even in-person meetings to deal with a conflict versus text or email. And I say that's because this is sort of known in the world of conflict resolution. When you can talk face-to-face, it's much easier to resolve a conflict. And along with that is include a mediator if you can. If I wish there was maybe there is and I'm not fully aware, if there was a mediating body to help bring different Muslim organizations, who are in conflict kind of together and resolve that conflict in a way that where they're not resorting to, at the most extreme case, lawsuits. I know that there were organizations that had that service, and maybe they're growing in other places. But mediation can be a very powerful and important tool. And then the third thing is when you're in conflict with someone or with another organization or with other people, when you're trying to work together, be ready to sometimes concede. Be ready with that ego-crushing humility of saying, you know what, the greater good is better than my pet idea. It's if we all go in with that willingness to sacrifice, as long as you're not, compromising your values, the ability to concede a point like that, to just let the conflict pass through can be, it will really be a huge reward to you. It will be very freeing, and then you'll be able to move forward with the project much easier. Being extremely stubborn and obsessively attached to your one idea and one point of view can be very destructive.
I could just quickly add to that, is that from personal experience, when I was the head of MSA National, we had different groups that said they wanted to say that MSA National should be with us. We should follow this ideology, that ideology. And I kept saying that on college campuses, everyone is coming from different backgrounds. And we can't possibly go in one direction and then the entire chapter or the organization becomes in that one direction. So we had fights. Conflicts are not bad. Conflict in a structured, functional conflict is good because it brings out in people, brings out the assumptions that are underlying that conflict. Like, what are you assuming about me when you say this and this about me? Or you think this and this about me? So Dalia and I are with other Muslim leaders interacting constantly. And we see things coming up and we're like, hey, is somebody on top of this or not? Hey, is this, I heard this, I came out of a convention, I heard this, what's going on with that? And then somebody will say, you know what, I did hear that as well, I'm gonna shut it down because it's not true, it's not what it was intended. And with mass, I can say this here, we had, same with ICNA, with ISNA, and with Al-Maghrib, and I kept saying it has to be an organization that's welcoming to everyone. And everyone should have access to it. All scholars should have access to that MSA, to that college campus, to that national organization. And because of that insistence, it took a long time before people realized that there was wisdom behind that approach. But because of that insistence, we went back to our roots. And the roots are what? That in the prophetic roots you'll find there are some companions whose entire focus was ibadah. This is literally what they did. Others were strategists of war. Others were wealthy businessmen, and then they contributed the wealth. So it will be that we can't say everyone has to be following this particular way of thinking, a way of worship, or levels of worship, and so forth. But conflict in and of itself isn't bad. And I want us to emphasize that. It's uncomfortable, it's difficult. Much of my aging process happened and has happened, she's laughing, damage control, behind the scenes, things that nobody knows about, whether it's two individuals, two organizations, two communities, going at it. I'm saying, what is this? Like, what is going to be the end of the way you're going in this direction? So if Allah gives you the ability to be the people to whom people approach, take that as a trust. Don't shy away from it, because there's not a lot of people who can manage that and still be fairly likable to everyone because of the justice and the fairness. If you are being able to be fair and just, people will come back and approach you and work with you. If they sense in you a lack of fairness, they will move away and they won't come back to you. Right? So may Allah bless all of you and reduce whatever conflicts are going on, but let us not shy away from it, because out of that can come growth. May Allah bless us with that growth, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair for those responses. Just a couple quick announcements, please don't go anywhere either. So our next session will be in this room at 2 p.m. and the topic is Unity and Diversity, Interfaith Explorations in College. So it's a good segue from what we were just talking about. And it is with Sheikh Aisha Prime and Sheikh Suhail Mullah. Other announcements: as part of the American Muslim Task Force for Palestine, there's going to be a march on Washington for Gaza on January 13th in DC. There is a need for volunteers, so you can find more details on our Instagram page, and I think there's QR codes on this podium if you want to scan those. There is a giveaway for Beats headphones as well. We call it MSA National and 1866 Nasiha on Instagram, and follow the directions on their post. And if please stop by our booth to get more information, follow us, hear more. Yeah, inshallah, we'll see you guys back at 2 p.m.